Cool. All right, here we go. Day 2, working on our SIE outline. Again, the main purpose of me doing these live streams, regardless of how many people end up watching, is to give you a little bit of a peek into how I break down material, for a professional in my space. How do I stay up on the content, right? This is FINRA's SIE outline here. Hang on, it must be on another screen. Here we go. Yep, here it is. This is FINRA's SIE outline. This is our best preview into what to expect on the exam. It's dense, it's difficult to make your way through, but that's where professionals like me come into play to take all this information, research it, and then distill it down to, hey, this is the stuff you might see on the exam. So we've only made it through three of the sections in section 1.1. We got a lot more to go through. We're only on page 3 of 15, so we have a lot to cover. Let's go back to our outline. Here's our outline. So we've already talked about the SECs, the SROs. We're currently on other regulators and agencies. We left off last time with Department of Treasury, Internal Revenue Service, state regulators being the state administrators that are out there. Oh, sorry, my camera went wild there. Let's see if I can get back here. Camera should be following my face. There we go. State regulators, which would be the state administrator, and then NASA, which is the organization that represents all state administrators. If you recall from yesterday, our state administrator is basically like the SEC at the state level. Every state has their own little office of we'll call it securities regulators. We refer to that as the state administrator as a generality. The state administrator in the real world, the names are different. I forget. Let's just look at it again. Colorado Securities State Administrator. This is my state. So it's called the Colorado Division of Securities is the state administrator here in Colorado. We left off with the Federal Reserve. Now there's a lot with the Federal Reserve, and I'm pretty sure, if I recall, the FINRA outline goes further in the depth on like what we need to know in relation to the Federal Reserve. For right now, I think in this part of the outline, we're just breaking down what the Federal Reserve is as an organization, and just like high level 14,000 foot view, like what do they do, which they oversee and implement monetary policy, which is controlling the size of the money supply. Just controlling the size of the money supply is an incredibly powerful tool. The ability to create money out of thin air or destroy money is, again, a really powerful tool, and it does have a drastic impact on the economy. We left off on their dual mandate. Technically, I was looking at this yesterday. Technically, the Federal Reserve has 3 goals. It's to, number 1, maximize employment. Number 2, stabilize prices, or another way of saying manage inflation, make sure inflation doesn't get out of hand. 3, the third one is also to moderate long-term interest rates, which I think most people will just boil down the Federal Reserve's role into like the 2 first ones being maximize employment, and then manage inflation. By doing those things through expanding, loosening or tightening the money supply, that will have an impact on short-term, intermediate term, and long-term interest rates. We'll get more into that stuff later in the in our outline breakdown. I think for right now, we're good. Federal Reserve, Bank of Banks, central banking system in the U.S. We'll come back to the Federal Reserve and talk about like what they do a little bit more in detail. By the way, I forgot to mention this. This outline that I'm creating is available to you. It's in the description. Now you can just view it. I don't need a bunch of people coming here and editing what I'm doing, but you have access to this. Whether or not you see this as useful, that's up to you. Whatever program you end up getting access to, whether it's an Achievable or a Kaplan or STC or whatever learning program you might use for your exam, It's probably a little bit better than what I have here. I'm just creating an outline that I'm eventually going to use for creating other products related to helping people pass these exams. But this is just a straight up outline. I mean, you might get some use out of this, but your book will probably flow a little bit better. Your program is probably a little bit better than this. And we're just doing research today. That's the whole point of these streams, guys. Is for you to give you for me to give you an insight, whether you're watching this live or you're watching this later on demand, give you some insight into, you know, what is a professional like me, what do I research, how do I stay on top of the material, and there's some topics here that we go a little bit further in depth than you need to know for the actual test, but I think it's, you know, I'm only going further in depth on stuff that I think is interesting and you might find is interesting. I don't know. But we have two other organizations to talk about before we go on to the next section of the SIE exam outline. First one being SIPC, the Securities Investor Protection Corporation. Let's look at their history real quick, which their website is going to be our best resource for this. SIPC was created by a form of legislation that sounds really similar to the name of the organization. So let's just read this. The Securities Investor and Protection Corporation had its origins in difficult years of 1968 through 1970. What happened 1968 through 70? When the paperwork crunch brought on by an unexpectedly high trading volume was followed by a very severe decline in stock prices. Let's look at this. Stock market 1968 to 1970. Let's see, what the heck happened? Inflation interest rates jumped in 1969. The stock market was down 30% by mid-year. Holy crap. That's like 30% is incredible. I mean, that's like 2008 stuff. The economy suffered a brief recession from December 1969 to November 1970, with unemployment rising to benign 5.5%. What does Barron's have to? Oh God, I like Barron's, but it's paywalled. Blah. Whatever. Let's see if we can find some other resource that we don't have to pay for. History of U.S. bear markets, 1957 to 2022. So this would include that 1968 period. Let's see. Where is it? How long did it last? Okay, that was a 17-month shoot. This is, you know, history of the stock market's not tested on the exam, which is why my knowledge might not be the best here. But it's interesting. Like when I think of like big problems in the stock market, there are problems in the 70s. We had the 1980s inflation problem, which like felt very much like, you know, from what I studied, I was born in 1984, so I wasn't around for the worst of it in the early 1980s. But feels like a lot of what happened in the 1980s was a way worse version of what we've lived through in the last couple of years. But look at this, 1968 to 1970, or I guess late 1968 to mid 1970, 17-month bear market where the market was down 36%. That's incredible. I mean, for context there, I mean, yeah, October 2007 and March 2009, the market was down 56%. So, you know, it was worse in 2007, 2008, 2009, but still down 36% is nothing to balk at. Either way. Okay. Hundreds of broker-dealers were merged, acquired, or simply went out of business. Now, one of the things we're going to learn here about what SIPC is, SIPC protects investors against broker-dealer failure. When we say broker-dealer failure, we're just saying, like, okay, if I have my money at a place like Charles Schwab, for example, and Charles Schwab goes bankrupt, like what happens to like my account? SIPC is there to protect investors and the assets they hold of these institutions from broker-dealer failure. So generally speaking, you really don't have to worry too much about that, depending on how much money you have deposited at that broker-dealer. Now, of course, like we'll learn a little bit here about the limits. The limits are this is not unlimited insurance against like broker-dealer failure. But let's keep reading this. Some were unable to meet their obligations to customers and went bankrupt. Public confidence in the U.S. securities markets was in jeopardy. One thing that you'll learn that the further you get into like the laws and legislation, some people are, I don't know, don't want to get like too political here, but I see a lot of people kind of gunning for a deregulated market, which there are some arguments there you might have that could be valid in some respects. But having a regulated market where investors have confidence in the system is one of the most important things that we need to have in order for this industry to thrive, right? I mean, we can always compare this to something like the crypto markets. Crypto, by and large, is very unregulated, and for most people, it's pretty scary, right? I'm not talking about like a younger person who's like building their own writing or looking at blockchains and like mining for crypto or whatever. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about your average everyday American. Your average everyday American, like the concept of investing directly into a cryptocurrency is pretty scary if you know anything about this market, because there's a lot of bad stuff that can happen. It's pretty simple. Just first and foremost, to lose the keys to your wallet. You got a public key and a private key. If you lose, you technically really either one of those, especially your private key, you're like that money's gone. That crypto is gone. There's even like there's like a legendary story out there of like there's some guy that had all his crypto. He had his wallet on like a USB drive, and he lost it or he threw it away. And today, the crypto that's on that wallet, on that USB drive, is worth something like some crazy amount. If I remember, hundreds of millions. It might even get into the billions. Let's see, lost USB drive, and it went to the let's see, just put trash. Here we go. 280 million. Man makes last ditch effort to recover 280 million in Bitcoin he accidentally threw out. This is such a crazy story. British man who accidentally threw out a hard drive with a trove of Bitcoin on it is again urging local city officials to let him search for it in a landfill. That's where he thinks it's in a landfill. He threw it out. The trash was taken out. 35-year-old IT engineer from Newport, Wales says he discarded the device while clearing out his home in 2013. He claims he had two identical laptop hard drives and that he mistakenly put one containing the cryptographic private key and needed to access his Bitcoins in the trash. Yeah. For those of you who don't know about crypto, you've got a public key that you give to people so they can send crypto to you or whatever. So that public key is like you give that to anyone, that's fine. And then you have a private key that you hold and like you protect, and it's like just basically like a long password. Two bad things can happen with that private key. Number one, if that private key becomes like publicly knowable, then immediately someone out there that's probably like a hacker or someone is going to go into your account, empty it out, and boom, that money's gone. The second problem is if you lose that private key, like this guy, there's no way to access to that money anymore. And these private keys, it's been a while since I've dealt with a crypto wallet myself, but these private keys are these are long alphanumeric passwords that are like impossible to just make up out of thin air. So it's just like if you lose it, you're screwed. So, I mean, we don't need to read this story. It's not relevant to the test, but the point is that when you have something like crypto that is generally like unregulated, stupid stuff can happen. Like you lose your private key and there's no like bank that's like well established that's holding this on your behalf. That's scary, right? Having confidence in terms of like your money is something that's so important. And that's why, if you're asking me as a person that teaches this stuff, I'm not a politician or anything, but I think regulation's important. Of course, there's like good and bad regulation, but regulation's important so that people have confidence in the industry. Now, in terms of like how far you go, that's a whole different conversation. But that's like going back to SIPC. So SIPC was introduced basically like from what we learned here, 1968 to 1970, bad times in the stock market. We had a bunch of broker dealers going bankrupt. Like imagine this. Imagine you have a brokerage account at a company. We'll pick on, let's say, E-Trade, for example. You got an E-Trade account with like $100,000 in it and it's got stocks in it. And then you wake up one day and E-Trade has gone out of business. You go to their website and like there's like a 404 error and like you can't access your account. You're freaking out, right? Well, SIPC, Securities Investor Protection Corporation, the SIPC insurance is there to calm you and say, hey, even if something like that, some crazy like that happens, we got you to a certain extent. Congress acted swiftly, passing the Securities Investor Protection Act in 1970. That might be worth it to write down. This was created created through legislation. And that's the key with like almost like all these organizations we're talking about in some way or form were either created by some legislation or some legislation created an organization and that organization empowered another. Like that's with the SROs, for example, like the Securities Exchange Act of 1934 created the SEC, and then the SEC appointed and makes FINRA handle kind of like lower level stuff, even though FINRA is not the government, right? SIPC was created by the Securities Investor Protection Act of 1970. That could easily show up on your name just as like a test. The Securities Investor Protection Act of 1970. Like, why is that important? Well, it created SIPC. Okay. The purpose. Let's go ahead and write down the purpose too. Purpose of SIPC insurance is to protect against broker. We'll type it out. Broker dealer failure. Okay. One big thing that the test focuses on with SIPC, it does not, I'll put this in all cap, does not insure against market or like investment risk. Okay. So like what do I mean by that? I mean, if I have, going back to the first example, if I have an E-Trade account and then the E-Trade goes bankrupt and I got all my stock in that account, like that's what SIPC is going to cover. Like what happens if the broker dealer that maintains your account, what happens if they go out of business, right? That's what that covers. But let's say I have an E-Trade account, E-Trade's doing fine as a company, and I invest in a bunch of crappy stocks that go nowhere and fall in value. SIPC will not cover me against my crappy investment decisions. Right. If I lose money on a stock in my account, that SIPC has nothing to do with that. And that's something to be aware of, not only for the SIE, but for like any exam that you might come across. Most exams, I think, in this field of FINRA and NASA exams will probably have at least some capability of, you might see some question about SIPC. Okay, Congress acted swiftly. SIPC is protecting customers against certain types of loss resulting from broker-dealer failure, and thereby to promote investor confidence in the nation's securities markets. Let's look at this. Like, this is a whole like history here. How far do we need to go back? Let's just maybe we can go back a little bit. SIPC, each customer is protected. Oh, so back in the 1970s, it was like the coverages were way lower than where they are today. We'll talk about where they are today. I don't think any of this is really that important for test purposes. But let's do this. SIPC coverage. By the way, hopefully it's not too annoying to listen to me today. I am still under the weather. My voice is questionable at best. All right, let's look at this. SIPC, okay, do condition, but SIPC applies to your protection investments if your brokerage firm is a SIPC member. By the way, every broker dealer in America is a SIPC member. It's required by law. You have a securities at your brokerage firm. You have cash at your brokerage firm to buy securities. SIPC does not protect your investments at the firm. Is not a SIPC member. I'm interested in like what, to best of my knowledge, to be a broker dealer, you have to be a SIPC member. But like I don't think that's important for exam purposes. Big thing here: market loss. Oof. Okay. Promises of investment performance, commodities or future. Yeah, it doesn't protect any of that stuff there. So how about this? Let's put this in the outline here. It covers securities and cash held in brokerage accounts. Okay. I'll put this as a side note here. It does not cover, what does it say? Futures, commodities or futures contracts. Commodities or futures contracts. I guess that could be something you see in the exam. By the way, a commodities contract, probably referring to like a forward contract. Like a commodity is like any good. Like this is stuff that you could see on the 63, 65, in particular 65 and 66. A commodity is any tradable good. So, for example, like oil is a commodity, soybeans are a commodity, wheat is a commodity. If you get into a contract to trade a commodity, those contracts can be traded. For example, a futures contract, the typical futures contract out there is a contract to buy or sell a commodity at a future date at a locked in price. So, for example, if I buy a futures contract for 1 million barrels of oil today at $70 a barrel, if that's for like a transaction that's going to occur in 4 months, right? I'm locking it. Okay, I'm buying 1 million barrels of oil at $70 in 4 months, right? Companies that deal with those commodities find those contracts valuable because it's basically takes like the guesswork out of like where the price of the oil might go or the price of the commodity. For example, if like you're buying oil, you might be worried, hey, for 4 months, I need a bunch of oil. What happens if the price rises between now and the next 4 months? Well, if I lock in that $70 barrel cost today, then I don't have to worry about the price going up. That'd be an example of a futures contract or a commodities contract. Yeah. But either way, SIPC doesn't cover those. Our investments with SIPC, or my investment with SIPC is, or my investments with a SIPC member. SIPC protects the customers of over 3,200 members. Most U.S. brokerage firms are required to be SIPC members. Yeah. I mean, like, I assume like any of the big companies, I mean, we can look at the list real quick. Any of the big companies are going to be here. So like, I know, for example, my former company, Fidelity, is on here. Let's see, Schwab is on there. I'm sure Vanguard is on here. Yep. I'm sure, like, what else? E-Trade. I don't even know, like, well, E-Trade is technically owned by Morgan Stanley now. So like Morgan Stanley, yeah. Merrill Lynch, cool. So, I mean, like literally every company you could think of, every broker dealer you think of is going to be on there. SIPC is here to help protect you, blah, 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 blah. Okay, like this, here we go. Okay, here's the coverages, which the exam, the SIE in particular, you're very likely to get a question. Or at least it's not, how about this? It's not rare to get a question by any means done on SIPC coverage. I'll do these from top of the dome here because I just know these. Excuse me, $500,000 coverage per registration. We'll talk about what that means here. I think they actually use the term per customer. I'm going to put per customer. We'll talk about that here in a second. Inclusive of $250,000 of cash coverage. So meaning, if I have a $500,000 account and it's all stocks, I get full coverage. Okay. On the other hand, if I have a $500,000 account and that's all cash, like it's uninvested cash, my account is only covered up to $250,000. So your cash coverage is only $250K. Something that they can easily like talk to you about on the exam. Okay. What just happened here? Here we go. It's the $500,000 includes up to $250,000 protection for cash in account to buy securities. I need more. Where is the coverage? What SIPC protects? Here we go. SIPC protects against loss of cash and securities such as stocks and bonds held by a customer. By the way, on our outline, we did talk technically and legally speaking, like what a security is. Stocks, bonds, mutual funds, exchange-traded funds, all that stuff, those are securities. But there's a legal definition that the Supreme Court decided on back in 1946 called the Howey decision. As a reminder, what is a security legally speaking? It is an investment of money as a common enterprise, meaning you're investing with other people, with the expectation of profit and in the efforts of others, or through the efforts of others, or through the efforts of a third party, which is another way of saying, like, if I invest in like Tesla stock, like Tesla manages Tesla, and Tesla's performance determines the value of my security. I don't determine the value of Tesla. I don't work for Tesla. So through the efforts of others, that's what that means. The limit of SIPC protection is $500,000, which includes $250,000 limit for cash. Let me rewrite that because I don't think if you read this later, $250,000 maximum cash coverage. Okay. Most customers of failed brokerage firms are protected when assets are missing from customer accounts. So guys, this would be like, not to get too much into the details here, but the worry here would be like, what happens if I have an account at E-Trade? E-Trade goes bankrupt, and then E-Trade loses my account somehow, which like can happen. It's possible. Like maybe they didn't segregate your fully paid for stock. We'll talk about that eventually. What that means, but like that's the big worry. What happens if my brokerage firm goes bankrupt and like they lost my account? There's no requirement that a customer reside in or be a citizen of the United States. A non-U.S. citizen with an account at a brokerage firm that is a member of SIPC is treated the same as a resident. Okay, you know what? I don't know if I've ever heard of anyone seeing that type of thing, this concept with SIPC covered, but it covers both U.S. and foreign investors. I'll put this, as long as account is held at a SIPC member, which is basically like every broker dealer in America. Okay. SIPC protection is limited. SIPC only protects the custody function of the broker dealer, which means that SIPC works to restore to customers their securities and cash in their accounts when the brokerage firm liquidation begins. Yeah. Let's kind of take a step back real quick and like talk about that term like liquidation. When a organization goes bankrupt, in particular like a corporation, there's usually a couple of things that can happen. There's like two primary things that can happen when a company goes bankrupt, corporation goes bankrupt, whatever. Option number one is, and by the way, like before any of this stuff I'm going to talk about happens, like if bankruptcy happens when a organization or a corporation is unable to pay its debts to its creditors, that's the main thing, right? They owe a bunch of money, they borrow money, they try to pay that money back and they can't for whatever reason. Whether it's interest, principal, or both, doesn't matter. That's when they're bankrupt. Now, if I'm a creditor and I'm owed money by a corporation that is going bankrupt, like I will band together and file typically a class action lawsuit against the failing company, and that takes them to bankruptcy court. Now, once we get to bankruptcy court, it's usually like it's way more complicated than this, but like there's one of two paths that a corporation will usually go down. Path number one is they will work with their creditors, restructure their debt, which is like a fancy way of saying throw out the old debts, we throw them in the trash, we reissue new debts. A lot of these new debts, like if you learned about the concept of what we call an income or adjustment bond, that's a bond that where money is owed to a creditor, but that money is only payable to them once the company starts making once they're profitable again. So basically, if we have creditors that think that the corporation can kind of like rise from the ashes and eventually like get their stuff together, let's give them a break and like paying money back for like a year or two. And then like, let's see if they can kind of figure this out. That's what we call restructuring of debt. Okay, so that's option number one, is restructure your debt. Now, option number two, if the creditors have no faith in the company, maybe like things are so bad, they're like, there's no way they're coming back from this, that's when they'll force a liquidation. And this all happens in bankruptcy court. Again, liquidation means, hey, company, take everything, your trade name, your copyrights, any kind of intellectual property, your long-term assets, your current assets, like your short-term assets, sell everything, and then pay us back whatever you can. Now that's important not only for the exam, but it's like an exam thing. So like, I'm going to try to bring up I've got slides on this somewhere that I use when I teach classes. But something that might be important to know for the exam would be liquidation priority. Okay. When that company starts selling everything and turning up cash when they're selling everything they can, it's like a fire sale, basically. That company, God, I've got it somewhere in here. That company will pay out whatever money they make through their liquidation to their shareholders, or not to their shareholders, but their creditors and potentially their shareholders, I should say. Let's do this. Secured creditors. Yeah, that's going to be in here somewhere. Come on. Here we go. Maybe I don't have it in here. How about this? I'm just going to put it in. Let's put it in the outline. I'm just going to put this like as a side note in my outline. Not dealing with any, I'm going to erase this as soon as I'm done. Liquidation priority. Okay. Now, I think if you come across this on the exam, they're only going to talk about 4 different parties typically. That would be first secured creditors. Now, when we say secured, a secured creditor is one that has lent money to an organization where there's collateral backing their loan. Personally, like if you think about loans from a personal standpoint, like for example, I own my house. That's a secured loan. I own my house, but I have a mortgage on it. Borrowed money from a bank, bought my house, I'm living in it. Now, if I don't pay that money back, then the house becomes property of the bank, basically. That's an example of a secured loan. In like corporate terms, an example of a secured loan, like, and this is all testable on like pretty much any exam you might come across. Example of this would be like an equipment trust certificate. Like Delta, the airliner, issues equipment trust certificates where they're like, hey, we need to borrow money and we're going to pledge our planes as collateral for the loan. If we can't pay you back, then we'll sell our planes. That would be an example of a secured, like if you bought that bond, you'd be a secured creditor. Next, we would have unsecured. They might also call these like unsecured creditors or like debenture holders if we're talking securities. The term debenture, a debenture is typically usually when we refer to debenture, we're referring to a corporate debt. You might come across every now and then what we call a municipal debenture, possibly, but I would just, as a generality, think it's a corporate debt. But it's a unsecured, full faith and credit corporate debt, which just means the corporations borrow money and they're pledging to pay that money back. But there's no collateral backing the loan. Okay. 3 would be preferred stockholders, and then 4 would be common stockholders. That's the general liquidation priority that I think you'll encounter on the exam. So company is forced to liquidate. They sell everything they possibly can. Like the biggest company I could think of that did this recently was Bed Bath & Beyond. They sold everything, including their trade name. Just as like a quick side note, there is still, like, if you went online and just Googled Bed Bath & Beyond, be like, oh, this company still exists. This is not the old Bed Bath & Beyond, okay? I'm pretty sure this is what we used to call Overstock.com. If you remember Overstock, Overstock bought, I think for like $24 million, bought Bed Bath & Beyond's trade name. And that's like when Bed Bath & Beyond, the original company, went through a liquidation, like we had to sell everything, including our name and our logo, which is worth 20 something million. Let's see. Let's just double check and make sure I'm right on that. Bed Bath & Beyond sells trade name. E-commerce retailer said Tuesday that will change its corporate name to Beyond Incorporated. No. Here we go. That's what it is. Overstock.com is revamping using Bed Bath & Beyond's name. Overstock.com is rebranding its website using Bed Bath & Beyond's name after it acquired intellectual property from the bankrupt company in June. Did they say how much they paid for it? $21.5 million. There we go. To sell intellectual property Overstock for $21.5 million in cash, including the website, mobile app, and name. So it wasn't just like the name. So they got the app and the name itself, in the website too. But yeah, Bed Bath & Beyond doesn't exist anymore. That's an example of a liquidation there. Okay, so company goes through a liquidation. Company like the old Bed Bath & Beyond goes through the liquidation, and then whatever cash they can kind of conjure up from that liquidation, then they distribute to, like in this order: secured creditors, unsecured creditors, preferred stock holders, common stockholders. Totally a testable thing. Unlike for all the major FINRA and NASA exams that I teach to, I think the only one you might not see this on would be the Series 63. So I tell you to know this, okay? For pretty much anything else. So you can see this on the SIE. I think you can see it on the 6 and the 7, on the 65 or 66. You can see it in any of those, I think. Okay. All right, back to this. Where's SIPC coverage? Okay, SIPC is limited, blah, blah, blah. SIPC does not protect against decline in value of your securities. We know that already. It's important to recognize SIPC protection is not the same protection as your FDIC insurance. We will talk about, that's literally the next thing we'll talk about. FDIC insurance as a preview is insurance that you have through your bank, okay? We'll talk about that. Investments in the stock market are subject to fluctuations in market value. SIPC was not created to protect these risks. That is why SIPC does not bail out investors when the value of their stocks, bonds, and other investments falls for any reason. Instead, liquidation, SIPC replaces blah, 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 blah. Okay. How my cash is protected. SIPC protects cash in a brokerage account from the sale of or for the purchase of securities. Cash held in connection with commodities trade is not protected. That's not important. Okay. What are securities? We talked about this yesterday, but like the definition of a security. I mean, here's like a really long list of securities. For those of you who are taking any of the NASA exams, meaning 63, 65, or 66, this is stuff that, like, for whatever reason, the legal definition of a security and examples of what's of securities themselves tends to be a really testable thing on those exams. Okay, so this, like, I'm not going to put this into our outline. That's just a lot of stuff. Again, that's probably more important for the NASA exams, but that's the idea. Security does not include a currency, commodity, or futures contract, or any warrant or right to subscribe to a purchase or sell of any of the foregoing. You know what's really interesting here? There might be a difference federal to state. For the state exams, the Uniform Securities Act considers a warrant or a right, unlike a stock, for example, to be a security. So maybe this is just a difference between federal and state law. I don't know, but whatever, not that important. I'm still looking for, hang on. Do they mention like debit on here? Nope. Okay. I'm still looking for the definition of here we go. Investors with multiple accounts. This is the last thing. If you're taking the SIE, the question is like, okay, I know what the coverages are. $500,000 total, inclusive of $250,000 in cash. But what if I have like 20 accounts? Or like for me, like, I mean, I got my accounts somewhere. I'm not gonna say where, but the place that holds my accounts, I have like 8 accounts there. So the question is like, if I have 8 different accounts, like what coverage do I get? Well, good news is that for the most part, when you have a different account registration, you get a whole separate coverage. So like, here's like, I was struggling with the word they used. It's cover. What does it say? How about this? Coverages. Let's do this. Coverage application. We'll kind of put it down here. Well, what was the word? I already forgot it. Per separate capacity. Which is like, separate account coverage. It's kind of what we're saying there, okay? I think the easiest way to think about this is basically when you have an account, like if I have an individual account, that'll get one coverage. But if I have another account where another person is involved in that account, that typically will also get a separate coverage. In addition to that, if I have like a non-retirement account and a retirement account, both under my individual name, both of those get separate coverages. So let's look at this here just to make sure. Accounts held in the same capacity are combined for purchases of SIPC protection limits. I'll come back to that. Examples of separate capacities. Let's copy and paste this in. Coverages apply on a per separate capacity basis. I bet that I kind of have that up there. Let's see. Let me put this. Considered separate capacities. And we'll paste this in here. Okay. So an individual account. So like imagine yourself, you have an account at a multiple accounts at a company. I have an individual account in my name. That's one coverage. I have a joint account with my spouse. That's another coverage. I have an account for the corporation that I own. Cool. That's a separate coverage. I have an account for like my family trust. Cool. That's a separate coverage. Let's just make these here. Let's make these like simplify these. Corporate account. We'll say trust account. An IRA. A traditional IRA, a Roth. We'll just have this. We'll just put traditional IRA, Roth IRA. So like if you have let's say you have 3 accounts at one company, one individual non-retirement account, one traditional IRA, one Roth IRA. Those are 3 separate coverages across those 3 accounts, even though they're all owned by you. Executor account, executor/estate. Like when we say executor account, we're talking about like an estate account. When someone dies, their money, any money that is not directly distributed to like heirs or beneficiaries through like a transfer on death designation, will go to their estate. Their estate is then, if they have a will, their will appoint an executor in that will, and that will tell that executor how to like distribute money to their heirs. But if I say executor estate account, that's like basically the same thing. Guardian. Wait. What did it say there? Account held by a guardian or for a ward or minor. Guardianship accounts or minor account. When I say I'm going to go ahead and just make an assumption. We just mean UTMA/UGMA on that. If you know about those accounts. Guardianship or minor accounts. We'll put those. Cool. So I think like a common question you could come across on something like this would be like, okay, in fact, I've got a question on this here. I can find it here real quick. But the question that I wrote on this recently, question would be something like, oh, here's a scenario. An investor has like has accounts in this company, and like you've got an account here. They've got an account with their spouse. They have an account with their, they've got an account with for their kid. You know, how many separate coverages and like how much coverage do they get? Basically, is like that. Typically, how those questions look and sound. Let's see if I can find it here. Oh yeah, here we go. Let's do this. Put this up here. Okay. Yeah, there we go. Oh shoot, I just realized I'm taking up the entire screen, so I'll get myself off for a second. How do I scroll? How do I do this? Let's put that up there a little bit. Okay, cool. That works. Jane Smith holds an account at an ABC broker-dealer, which has just declared bankruptcy. See if I can put myself maybe back on here and make myself a little smaller. Yeah, I'll throw myself on here somewhere. There we go. I'll put myself here. Not blocking anything. Cool. Jane, by the way, this is an account. This is a question I just wrote. That I think this could sound like something you see on the exam. Jane Smith holds an account at ABC broker-dealer, which has just declared bankruptcy. Shoot, I have the answer up here. So for those of you who are watching right now, sorry, the spoiler alert, the answer is down below. So Jane Smith holds an account at ABC broker-dealer, which has just declared bankruptcy. Ms. Smith holds the following accounts of the firm. So we have 4 accounts there: individual cash, individual margin, joint cash account, custodial account for their daughter. Okay, so like what statements are true? Like let's look at A real quick and just we'll pick this apart. Okay, number 1, A. All the accounts are fully covered by SIPC insurance. Now, we got to remember, we have 2 different like numbers we have to kind of play with here. $500,000 total coverage per separate capacity, no more than $250,000 in cash. So let's just start with the separate capacity thing here first. The question is, how many capacities do we have across those 4 accounts? The answer is 3. There are 3 separate capacities. The individual accounts, the first 2 mentioned, we haven't talked about this in these study halls, but there are 2 primary types of accounts you can open up at a broker-dealer. Number 1 would be a cash account, and then second would be a margin account. A margin account is one that you can, where you can borrow stuff in. And when I say stuff, I mean either cash to invest into a security, or you can borrow a security to sell it short. So you can borrow cash or securities in a margin account. We'll talk more about margin eventually, but for cash accounts and margin accounts are considered one, like that's only one capacity. So we don't consider those 2 accounts 2 separate accounts. For SIPC purposes, that's one account. Okay. No, joint cash account, we have that. That's a separate capacity. Whenever you add a new person onto an account, like I assume, that's an account that they probably hold with their spouse or something like that. That's a new person in there that gets a separate coverage, and then the custodial account for the daughter, that's a new person that gets a separate coverage. Those are so we have 3 separate capacities across the 4 different accounts. So if you look at this, the question is, do we get full coverage? And I'm going to work up on this one from the bottom up. Custodial account for the daughter, $10,000 in securities. That's easily covered by SIPC, number 1. Okay, we can cross that one out. So joint cash account, $300,000 in securities, $100,000 in cash. That's covered as well. Doesn't exceed $500,000 in total value, and it's no more than $100,000, or no, it's not, doesn't exceed $250,000 in cash. Cool, we're good there. Then we look at the 2 accounts up top, the 2 individual accounts, both of which are combined together as one separate capacity. Well, if we can add up all the numbers there, we have $450,000 in the first account. And then real quick on the second account, the margin account, there's $200,000 in securities, but a $40,000 debit balance. When we say a debit balance, that is money that they have borrowed, that they have to pay back to their broker dealer. And any debit balance that's on an account, it reduces the overall account's value. So that account is only worth $160,000. SIPC treats that, like, if you're trying to figure out how much an account holds in it to determine if the coverage applies or how much it applies, you subtract any debit balance out of a margin account from its overall value. So first account, we have $450,000 total. The second account, we have $160,000 total. Okay. When we add those 2 numbers together, what does that give us? $610,000 in total value. So because we include those 2 accounts as like one coverage, those 2 accounts are not going to be fully covered by SIPC. We'll get to this. So we'll eventually put this on the outline that we're working on here. But any amount that is not covered by SIPC, you become a general creditor of that corporation, of that broker dealer, as they're going through liquidation. So you become a general creditor. There's a whole process that we'll eventually look at with that. But point is that A is not true because the first 2 accounts are not fully covered. There's what did I say here? There's like $110,000 of that they're just not covered on. Okay, that's number 1. 2, let's look at B. SIPC will consider 4 separate customers for coverage purposes. We already talked about this. There are 3 separate customers or 3 separate capacities for coverage purposes here. Yeah, so B is wrong. Now, because B is wrong, then we can go to D. Like, we know A is wrong, we know B is wrong. That means D can't possibly be the answer, right? Now, if you ever like eliminate 3 of the wrong answers, I never recommend on the actual exam that you just like, okay, well, I'm not even gonna look at C. I know C has to be the answer. C is probably your answer, but let's just double check and make sure that like C makes sense. Ms. Smith will become a general creditor of ABC Broker Dealer. That goes back to what we just talked about, right? The first 2 accounts, $110,000 of that is not going to be covered. Therefore, whatever is not covered by SIPC, they become a general creditor of broker dealer, of the failing broker dealer. That's the idea. Okay. Good example of a question I think you could easily see on the exam. Okay. Let me go back here. Let's go back here. All right. So we're on our outline. So we talked about the different separate capacities. Yeah. I mean, is there anything else worthy of talking about here on this one? Any additional information? Series 100. Okay. Well, following examples are separate accounts. Mary has an account in her name at a brokerage firm. Mary's protected by SIPC of up to $500K. Okay, we know that. Joe has 2 brokerage accounts, each in his own name. For SIPC protection, Joe's accounts are combined, and Joe is protected by SIPC only up to a total of $500,000. That's like the individual and the cash account, or the cash account and the margin account we just talked about. Joe and Mary are married, and they have a joint account, joint brokerage account, which is separate from the individual accounts they have at each firm. Now, if we have Joe and Mary, each has an individual account, plus they have a joint account together, that's going to be 3 separate coverages they have for those 3 accounts. An additional maximum of $500,000 of SIPC protection is available for the joint account. So they have 1 for each individual account, plus another separate one for the joint account. Cool. And then Joe has a Roth account and an IRA account. So I assume they mean Roth and traditional IRA account at the same brokerage. They're protected up to $500,000 for the Roth account and $500,000 for the IRA. Yeah, so for IRAs, the different registrations, whether it's Roth or traditional, those get 2 separate coverages. Cool. Awesome. Now, The only other thing I want to cover real quick is let's see, exceed limits. What happens if you have an account at a broker dealer that goes bankrupt, and then you're not fully covered? Here we go. What happens if my claim is over the SIPC limits of protection? All customers who are eligible share in any customer property collected by the trustee. By the way, that is something. Actually, let me bring this down a bit on my screen. Here we go. Cool. And also, let me move my stupid face here. Give me a sec. All right, cool. What happens if my claim is over the SIPC limits? Okay, cool. All customers who are eligible share in any customer property collected by the trustee. By the way, when a broker-dealer goes bankrupt, a trustee is appointed to oversee the liquidation of that broker-dealer. I wonder if they mention the trustee. Oh, yeah, look at that. 36 mentions of the trustee here. So let's see where they start talking about the trustee. Here we go. Even if you receive notice that your account has been transferred, you should file a claim with the trustee. By the way, trustee is just like a party that's hired to kind of oversee and make sure that SIPC covers what it should cover. In fact, is there maybe we should look at that real quick. SIPC trustee. How liquidations works. Okay, here we go. Liquidation generally begins with the court appointing a trustee for the broker-dealer. Okay, let's write that on our outline. Okay, if a broker-dealer fails, okay, you can't really see what I'm writing here. If a broker-dealer fails, bankruptcy court appoints a trustee. Okay. Cool. Under SIPC's oversight, the trustee gets to work right away to restore securities and cash to customers as soon as possible. In a failed brokerage firm with accurate records, the trustee and SIPC may arrange to have some or all customer accounts transferred to another brokerage firm. So yeah, theoretically speaking, if a broker dealer goes bankrupt and they're doing everything the way they should have been doing it, they just ran out of money, then all the customers' accounts should still be held in the right place. There should be nothing too crazy to do here. And they would just be oh, we're going to move your money over to Robinhood or Fidelity or whatever other broker dealer. Customers whose assets are transferred are notified promptly of the move. Even if a customer's account is transferred, the customer should still file a claim with the trustee. Yeah. So if you have an account at a broker dealer where they fail, it's just let the trustee know just in case something doesn't move over or whatever. Once the transfer is made, customers may leave their accounts at the new firm or move them to another brokerage. Yeah. Is there anything else here worthy of talking about? No, I think we're probably good on this one. Let's look at this though. What was something was outlined. Here we go. Let's go to the purple highlight there. What happens if my claim is over the SIPC limits? Here we go. All customers who are eligible share in any customer property collected by the trustee. Because collecting this property can take time, the trustee uses funds advanced by SIPC to return customers' cash and securities up to the limits of SIPC protection. So this is a way of saying that as we're figuring out what the heck went wrong with this broker dealer and eventually moving your money over, or figuring out where your money is, we're going to preliminarily give you money out of our own accounts. If I had $100,000 of cash in a brokerage account, we're going to go and just shoot over $100,000 to you. And then when we find your money, we'll just keep your money once we find it because we've given you $100,000 of our own money, something like that. As a result, customers typically can recover their cash and security sooner. If your claim is over the limits of a SIPC protection, you will share in customer property equally with all the customers. And if after having had your claim satisfied out of SIPC advances and you're receiving your share of customer property, your claim is still not fully satisfied, you will be eligible to receive a distribution as a general creditor to the extent that there are any general estate assets. So how about this? Trustee moves, identifies and moves assets / cash to new BD. I haven't put a side note here. I don't know how important this is for the exam. SIPC may I'll put this in quotations, may front payments out of their own funds before assets / cash is transferred. Okay. Yeah, we'll just leave it there. Okay. Amounts, let's say customer assets / cash, type here, not covered by SIPC. Customer becomes general creditor of failed BD. I think it's as much as we need to know. Ooh, here we go. Let's talk about the filing date here real quick. I've heard of people getting questions on filing date. Okay. What is the filing date? Filing date is usually the date that SIPC files an application in court to initiate liquidation proceeding for direct payment procedures, blah, 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 blah. I believe, and God, I'm looking to confirm this here. You might be wondering, like, okay, SIPC covers my account for like up to these amounts. Let's say your account's all in securities. You know, if you have an account of securities, your account value fluctuates pretty like on a daily basis, goes up and down. It might go up and down wildly if we're in like kind of a crazy wild market. So I guess the question here would be like, okay, like what if my account's like right on the threshold? What if it's like right on 500K? Like one day it goes above 500K, the next day it goes below 500K. Like what day do they actually, like what's the value of my account? What day do we actually look at my account? I believe that the filing date, which is the date that SIPC files an application in court to initiate the liquidation proceeding, that is the day where they'll like take a snapshot of your account and figure out like what's your account worth. But they're just not explicit here. Filing date, what is it? I don't want. Here we go. Here we go. Maybe it's in the actual law itself. Where's filing date? Okay, here we go. Filing date means the date on which the corporation is appointed as a receiver of covered trustee, determination of claims of assets, all claims against the broker on or before the filing date. The day the customer took this action will be considered the filing date to determine the net equity. Yeah. What is... Yes, if you've watched me yesterday or watched my last video on this, like Investopedia, generally a good resource, but I do find some stuff in here that I sometimes disagree with. When dealing with the liquidation, customer status will be determined by SIPC in relation to the filing date for the proceedings. If an individual acted with cash or securities with the firm that is being liquidated after the filing date of the liquidation, may still be classified as a customer. Yeah, I think this just like confirms what I already thought. The securities will be valued based on the close of business and the filing date. There we go. Okay. Here we go. So we're value customer assets / cash valued on filing date. How about this? End of, I'll be at EOB. Value of account at end of business day, end of the day, snapshot. Oops, can't see what I'm writing here. How coverages will apply. How about this? Snapshot of account value. At the end of day. Oops. Now, technically, we'll also put this of customer. Then we should also put technically like what the heck is the filing date. What just happened there? Filing date is the day SIPC files. What do they say? Well, files liquidation paperwork. Is that the terminology they used? Filing date is usually the day it files an application in court to initiate. Okay, so files application in court for liquidation. Cool. I think that's as far as we need to go with SIPC. Yeah, we might come back to SIPC, but like there's a lot of stuff there. I think you could easily see any of that stuff. Cool. All right, let's go to our good old friend, the FDIC. FDIC history. Let's see if we can go straight to the source on this one. Yep, we can. "90 years of the FDIC." Cool website. FDIC was created. FDIC Insurance Corporation was created in 1933 during the economic turmoil of the Great Depression. Oh God, like I don't need pictures and shit here. I need the straight up. I might just have to go to the wiki. Here we go. Maybe this is better. I don't need a video. I need writing. Let's just do wiki. Here we go. I trust the wiki on boring stuff like FDIC. FDIC is a United States government corporation. So, like, what's the definition of a government corporation? State-owned enterprises? Yeah. So I assume like this would be like Fannie would be in here. Yep. Freddie Mac, Fannie is in there. Jenny Mae. So USPS, that's interesting. So these are like companies owned by the U.S. government that are technically considered part of the government, but also like are like kind of businesses within themselves. The USPS is a business, right? Fannie and Freddie are businesses. Interesting list here. I don't really notice. Tennessee Valley Authority. I heard of someone mentioning Tennessee Valley Authority coming up on an exam, so let's just look at that real quick. Tennessee Valley Authority is a federally owned electric utility corporation in the U.S. TVA's. Yeah, okay, we're going in the weeds. Okay, yeah. Let me you guys, if you're watching this, you probably are kind of getting a hint of my undiagnosed ADD here, but let's stay focused. FDIC is a United States government corporation supplying deposit insurance to depositors in American commercial banks and savings banks. FDIC was created by the Banking Act in 1933. By the way, I don't think they'll ever bring up the Banking Act in 1933. Bank legislations just don't show up on securities exams generally. Enacted during the Great Depression to restore trust in the American banking system. God, was it FDR? God, I don't know my American history as well as I should. Was it FDR? I guess this is all part of like the New Deal stuff. God, I haven't studied U.S. history since like high school. But like the amount of the incredible amount of legislation that was created in the 1930s out of like freaking out due to the Great Depression was just insane. Roosevelt, here we go. Yeah, it was resisted by the FDR, but later became part of the New Deal. Let's look at this just real quick. What's part of the New Deal? Do we have like a list of legislations that are part of the New Deal? Here we go. Oh, God. So FDR, did he do this all in his first 100 days? Insane if he did. So Securities Act 1933 is part of the Great Deal. Repealed Prohibition. Awesome. Farm and rural programs. Recovery. Blah, 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 blah. So there's just a lot of stuff here. Again, I'm getting distracted. Again. Sorry. But yeah, do we need to worry about the Banking Act of 1933? No. Okay. Insurance was initially US $2,500 per category. Of course, that's grown 100 times that since this is initially created. FDA's, here we go. Since the enactment of the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act of 2010, the FDIC insurance deposits in member banks are up to $250,000 per ownership category. The ownership category, from what I understand, and we'll look at this here, is pretty similar to like what we did with SIPC with separate capacities. We'll double check that though. In fact, there is a no, I don't want to go to Boston Globe. FDIC insurance is backed by the full faith and credit of the government of the United States. So FDIC is like this is why no one, for the most part, unless you have a lot of money at a bank, but most people have no worries about having money at a bank and like losing it because the bank fails, which creates a lot of trust in our financial system. Again, like, you know, before FDIC insurance existed, you had to worry about like, okay, if I'm putting my money in Bank of America, is Bank of America going to like go bankrupt? Like, do I have to worry about anything stupid happening with Bank of America? Nowadays, is like the biggest gripes you have are like fees. Like, oh, I got to worry about this fee and that fee, and like it's a pain in the butt to call this company or whatever. But you like, most people have no worries about having money held at a bank. Okay. Now, who does have to worry about holding money in a bank? Well, if you have an incredible amount of money at that bank, then yeah, becomes like a bigger problem or bigger thing you'd think about. For example, if I have $1 million at like Bank of America deposited in some savings account, I might have to worry a little bit about Bank of America going belly up because I only get $250,000 of coverage per category. Okay. There are like really easy ways nowadays to get around that and to like to kind of just make sure your money's deposited in multiple banks. For example, companies like Fidelity and Schwab, like you can open up one account, deposit like, you know, a bunch of money in that account and have that money held technically at like multiple banks all within one account. Yeah. FDIC is not supported by public funds. Member banks' insurance dues are their primary source of funding. So yeah, banks just kind of like, we didn't mention this with SIPC. In fact, we should probably, that's one thing we probably should have done with SIPC. SIPC funding. SIPC is funded by the broker dealers that are part of SIPC, right? SIPC was established in 1970 to blah, 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 blah. SIPC member assessments and interest on U.S. government securities bought by SIPC are deposited into the fund. So that's it. So in fact, let's write that down for SIPC. Last quick thing. We'll do SIPC funding. Member dues, as a reminder, from BDs, broker dealers, and interest. We'll just put this as a separate line. Interest from U.S. government securities held in SIPC accounts. What was the term they used there? In SIPC, we'll see SIPC fund. There's like a fund that SIPC holds. So like, hey, we got to pay out a bunch of money. We got money. It's kind of on standby. Cool. Okay. So FDIC insurance. Let's just kind of put this, a couple things here we've learned so far. Covers bank deposits up to $250,000 per. What term did FDIC use? Do I not have an FDIC tab open? I thought I did. Oh, no, I do. Here at the Wiki tab. FDIC insurance, $250,000 per ownership category. Per ownership category. So, like, let's go in a little bit of a, let's do this. FDIC ownership categories. Yeah, there we go. Separate insurance is provided to each depositor. Deposit accounts maintained by or separately insured. Depositors may qualify to receive FDIC deposit insurance, including natural persons and legal entities such as corporations, partnerships, unincorporated, blah, 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 blah. Do they have a list? Here we go. There are 14 FDIC deposit insurance ownership categories. Geez, is it worth it for us to write all this crap down? I mean, single accounts, certain retirement accounts, joint accounts, trust accounts, employee benefit accounts, business organization accounts, government accounts, mortgage servicing accounts, accounts held by a depository, a trustee of a revocable trust. I'm just gonna put this here. Ownership. If I can type here, ownership categories similar to SIPC. Separate capacities. I've never, God, I mean, like people are not supposed to talk about the exam, but like I keep my ear to the streets as much as I can. I have not heard of any. I've never had anyone come back and tell me like, geez, I wish I studied FDIC, like the specifics of the FDIC a little bit more. I do think FDIC very well could show up on your exam, but I don't think they're going to get like into the weeds and like, give me the ownership categories, blah, 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 blah. In fact, like these first two bullet points, I think is probably as far as they're going to go. We'll put this here. FDIC funding. Is it member dues? Member banks' insurance dues are a primary source of funding. FDIC charges premiums based on risk of the insurance bank closes. When dues and the proceeds of bank liquidations are insufficient, it can borrow from the federal government, issue debt through the federal financing bank, whatever the heck that is, on terms of the bank decides. So we'll just have primarily funded through membership dues. And I would just assume like this would be another area where like I assume every bank in the United States is FDIC insured and an FDIC member. I've never found anything otherwise. There might be some weird niche like example I'm not thinking of, but that's the idea. You know what's interesting about FDIC? Like we've actually had some recent bank failures, like that Silicon Valley Bank. That was the big one that I can remember recently. What is it like? This was like a year or two ago where like we had a bunch of banks, a lot of them like mid-sized. None of the big banks had like any problems, but a lot of the mid-sized banks like just like had like the question was like, are they going to survive? Silicon Valley. Let's look at the news here, or like the let's look at the wiki. If I recall, like this is like the bank where a bunch of tech people held their money. This is the bank known for like lending money to startups and stuff, if I recall. Bank was previously primary blah 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 blah. As a regional bank of the San Francisco Bay Area, SVB offers services specifically designed to meet the needs of the tech industry, and soon became the largest bank by deposits in Silicon Valley, and the preferred bank of almost half of venture-backed tech startups. So there we go. Okay, cool. The only reason why I'm bringing this up is because if I recall, like here's the thing you have to think of from like a high level view. Okay. If we go back to like 2008 will be forever like etched in my brain as like a crazy time, because I got into the industry as as a member of the industry in 2007. And then 2008 was actually my first full year in the securities industry. And I was like, holy shit, like what did I get myself into? What a crazy time. If one thing that we heard a lot of people say, and like it was hard to kind of grasp the idea behind this, but what we heard a lot of people say was like the financial system as we know it is on the brink of failure. I mean, like our financial system was about to blow up, basically. Okay. Without going into like great detail, we had all these people, 2008, we run into a bad recession. By the way, hang on. I hate how this camera does this. Now it should be following me around. Okay, cool. We had a bad recession where that was kind of led into by like bad mortgage loans. If you've ever watched like a great movie on this is The Big Short, great movie. But the banking industry in general was like giving out way too many loans to people who just could not justify having those loans. If you've seen that movie, they kind of realized the problem. The people in that movie, Steve Carell's character and his team of people like go down to Florida and like, holy shit, like this is like a crazy problem that like we have now uncovered. They were like talking to exotic dance strippers. Basically, they owned like 5 different houses and like couldn't like if anything happened, they like to their jobs, they weren't going to be able to afford like their mortgages. So we had all these bad loans, right, to people who couldn't afford them. And then, like with those mortgages, by the way, this is all testable potentially, or like the underlying concepts here are testable on the SIE, probably more so the Series 7. I'm eventually going to get to mortgage-backed securities, but the reason why these banks were giving out quote bad loans, you might be thinking like, hey, like a bank if it gives out a bad loan and people fail on those loans, that's bad for the bank, right? Well, kind of. what was happening is that these banks would give out bad mortgages to the customers. Then behind the scenes, as soon as the bank gave out that mortgage, there would be institutions that would buy up those mortgages from those banks and put them into complex mortgage-backed security products. So like your local bank gives out a mortgage to someone who probably shouldn't, like someone that has like, they call them ninja loans in the movie, in the Big Short movie. Ninja being no income, no job, no problem. They give out like these big mortgages to these people who couldn't afford the mortgage payments. The assumption was that like if they couldn't afford it, they could just sell the house and they could then they could pay off the mortgage then. But like what happens if like when like the housing market collapses? So give out a mortgage to someone who doesn't deserve it. The person that receives, the bank that gives out that mortgage then like gets a call from like Morgan Stanley. And Morgan Stanley's like, hey, like show us your balance sheet of mortgages. We have like $3 billion of money that we want to use to buy up like as many mortgages from you as we can. So like from the bank's perspective, they're making banking fees. They're all like, if you've never bought a house, there's all these fees you got to pay to the lender. You got to pay points, got to pay fees, blah, blah, blah. So it's like profitable to banks to give out mortgages. But the reason why they didn't care about who they were giving those mortgages to is like, okay, hey, like if we give out this mortgage, Morgan Stanley's going to give me a call tomorrow and just buy it off of us. So it's not a problem anymore. Right? So Morgan Stanley comes and buys up those mortgages, puts them into products, and then they're selling those products to like the world, including like retirees, pension plans, insurance companies. And like when the show stopped, when the shit hit the fan, and people were losing their jobs and people were foreclosing on their mortgages, and those mortgages were impacting the mortgage-backed securities. It literally, like, the whole point I'm trying to get across here is that like it created like a domino effect where like the question of our financial system surviving was a legitimate question. It was like, okay, you have a bank account, you have a brokerage account, like everything you know about the financial system itself is about to like change because it's about to fail. Government came in and the government, what was it? Like how many rescue packages? I think it was over $1 trillion of like money the government had to infuse into these institutions. And I know there's a lot of people out there that are like, oh, the government should just let these organizations fail. If the government didn't do anything, we would have seen the entire collapse of our system, which like in the long run, maybe you can make an argument like, hey, 50 years later, maybe it was good that happened. But for like 10, 20 years, that would have been like chaos. Would have been crazy. Okay. So I guess the point I'm trying to get across here is that like faith in our financial system and having some kind of guardrails to make sure it doesn't fall off a cliff are really important. Right? Why? Like, and one of those things that is kind of like a guardrail institution is FDIC. Now, with going back to SVB here, SVB failed, and then there are all these mumblings of like, I don't know if you recall, this was only like a year or two. When was this? March 2023. So like a year and a half ago, not even that long ago. When these banks were like, it was like almost seemed like a domino effect. It felt very much to me like the beginning of 2008. I was freaking out a little bit when this stuff was happening. When one bank was failing and then other banks were failing, other banks were failing. People start getting freaked out and start pulling their money out of their. If I have a bank that's facing financial troubles and I'm like, okay, screw this, let me get the money out of this bank and put it into like a bigger, like a Chase or something that I know is not going to fail. Like that creates like, it's almost like we had a mini run on the bank, like a digital run on the bank with these things. So like, I'm going to have to look at this here, but I'm pretty sure that the government came in particular, the U.S. Treasury. Yeah, they talk about it right here. Treasury came in and said, hey guys, calm the hell down. FDIC insurance is going to cover this. Plus, like, keep in mind, like FDIC insurance coverage is only $250,000. Like, if this is a tech startup bank, like a lot of those accounts have way more than $250K in there. I'll read this just to make sure I'm not telling a lie here or misremembering, but I'm pretty sure the government came out and basically said, like, we're not only FDIC is going to cover us, but whatever FDIC doesn't cover, we're unlimited coverage on top of that. The government's got you. March 12, 2023, in a joint statement issued by the Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen, Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell. They're both there, still in their positions. And FDIC Chairman Martin Grunberg. I don't know about Martin Grunberg. That all depositors as SVP would be fully protected and have their access to both insured and uninsured deposits starting the following Monday, March 13th. That's the government basically coming in saying, hey, guys, calm the fuck down right now. Calm down. We got your deposits. You don't have to worry about it. And like that, we don't even I had to kind of remind myself of this. This could have become a way bigger issue if we didn't have some kind of government intervention, at least in my opinion. So the whole point here is that some people argue this sets a bad precedent, that the government's always going to come in and save banks that make bad decisions, and companies banks like SVB. If you read through this, if you read through this wiki, which we won't, there were some bad decisions this bank made, bad business operations. But the point is that there's a difference between letting a single company fail and just okay, you screwed up, you got to fail, see ya, versus a risk to the entire system is a whole different conversation. Okay. But the point is that we have things like FDIC and put insurance in place, and we also have we have a precedent here. The government, hey, came in and said, hey, even though your coverage is only up to $250K, technically we'll cover the rest. We got the rest. We got you. Okay. I guess back to our outline. There's really not much we need to go on beyond that. I know we talked a lot about FDIC and risk to the system and all that stuff here, but for test purposes on the SIE, you just need to know the very basics. All right, let's go back to our outline. What's the next stuff we need to talk about? Market participants and their roles. Okay. All right. Can I copy paste from the outline? I'm tired of typing out everything. Let's see. Can I copy paste? Come on, Fenrir. Let me copy paste. Yeah. There we go. Let's copy. Let's go back here. Let's see if we can paste this in here without it's going to look funky for a second, but let's see. Boom, boom, boom. Oops. Nope. Yep. Okay. That works. What was it? Yeah, there we go. Okay. We're on 1.1.4, market participants in the roles. We have investors. We have broker dealers. What did I do here? Oops. We have investors. We have broker dealers. We have investment advisors. Let me just move all these over. Cool. We'll format it here correctly. All right. Investment advisors, municipal advisors, issuers, and underwriters. We'll talk about those. Traders and market makers, custodians and trustees, transfer agents, depositories and clearing corporations, being the DTCC, Option Clearing Corporation, all that stuff there. Okay. So a lot of stuff to cover here. Oof. Okay. Let's start with and obviously the investors. We'll go to the end here. What the heck is an investor? I know that seems like a really simple question, but really it's not. There are three general types of investors here. They mentioned the three. I primarily we're going to focus on institutional and retail. We'll start with accredited first. An accredited investor is defined in what we call Regulation D, which is our private placement rule from the Securities Act of 1933. That's where that law comes from. Now here's I know this is later in the outline, we'll go into depth on Regulation D, but in terms of the rule itself. But Regulation D basically says, hey, if you want to sell a security and avoid the registration process, right? We talked about this yesterday about how if I want to offer a security publicly and I don't have an exemption for that security, I got to file all this paperwork with the SEC. I got to pay a filing fee. I got to do all these disclosures. To do those disclosures, I got to hire lawyers and accountants to put those disclosures together and blah, blah. It's offering a security publicly is incredibly time and cost intensive, incredibly. Now, one way you can get around that is through Regulation D, which basically says, hey, if you're offering a security to a small private audience of investors and not publicly, you can avoid registration. There are different versions of Regulation D. The main one basically says, hey, if you're not offering it to any more than 35 non-accredited investors, then cool, you can that's considered a private placement. You don't need to register the security. Awesome. So like in like a nutshell, like what's happening there is that if we have an organization say selling stock they don't want to register, as long as they're just selling it to like institutions, like venture capital firms, investment companies, mutual funds, banks, insurance companies, that type of thing. If they're just selling it to institutions and then wealthy individual investors that are considered accredited, they generally don't need to worry about registering the security. And as like another thing we hinted at yesterday. Shoot, I gotta get used to this new camera, guys. Sorry. The rules that we care about most, whether it's a SEC rule, a FINRA rule, or a legislation, almost the biggest rules are there to protect small retail investors, which are just basically individual investors investing for themselves or maybe their family. Because these are the investors that are most likely to be taken advantage of and need the most protection, right? An institutional investor, we talked about how yesterday, like mutual funds are an example of an institutional investor. Institutional investors are professional investors that invest customer or client money on their behalf and make money doing that, right? Institutional investors typically have access to a ton of resources, legal resources, accounting resources, compliance resources. Just like if I were to like sell a security to Fidelity, to like a Fidelity mutual fund, it would be almost impossible for me to like fraudulently do that. Why? It's because Fidelity lawyers and advisors and analysts will look at what I'm offering them and like they will know if it's bullshit or not. Like if I'm trying to bullshit them. So the point is that like institutional investors generally don't need much hand-holding, don't need much protection. And that's kind of the whole idea of like when we get back to this whole like private placement rule, hey, basically sell it to a bunch of institutions and like wealthy individual investors that have access to resources, and cool. We don't need to like oversee much of what you're doing. That's the point of Regulation D. Okay. Let's talk about let's just define accredited investors. The type or the qualifications. Okay, this is all like everything I'm about to talk about here. This could show up on any of the major FINRA or NASA exams, SIE 6, 7, 63, 65, 66. This could show up on any, even like the Series 10. This could show up on that one. Okay, so let's talk about like accredited investor definition. Let's see if we can go straight to the source. Here we go. SEC. Love SEC.gov. Okay. All right. Let's talk about this. Does they list all of them? Owners, professional. There should be more than just this. There's like weird ones. I don't want to say weird, but like there's like ones for like indigenous populations as well. Where did I see that? I'll just go back here. We'll stick to the SEC's website, and then I'll see if I can find what I was thinking here. Okay. All right. So we already, okay. The qualifications. Net worth of, over this, 1 million net worth, excluding primary residence. Okay. That could be individual or joint if you're like considering your net worth with a spouse, something like that. $1 million net worth, excluding your primary residence. And then 200,000, we'll put 200K annual income if you're filing single for last 2+ years, or 300,000 annual income if you're filing joint for last 2+ years. Meaning that like I can't just make like a bunch of money this year and qualify immediately through like the annual income thing. Like if I make $250,000 as an individual this year, it's the first time I made that amount of money, then like I have to prove that again next year to be considered accredited. Let's just make sure that's the case here. Income of 200,000 individually, 300,000 spouse or partner in each of the following prior 2 years, and reasonably expects the same for the current year. I guess like maybe that second part, that last part there, is something to be kind of aware of. But like if like I'm not expecting to make the same amount of money the next year, then yeah, then I guess technically you're not considered accredited. Professional criteria. Here we go. This is one of the cool things. For those of you who are taking a Series 7, Series 65, or Series 82, if you pass that exam, and that license is actively held at like a firm, you become, by virtue of just like passing that exam and being in the industry, an accredited investor. So Series 7, 65, or 82 holder. Okay. Now you might be wondering why would that be important? Think about like any big company that's like kind of grown, let's say somewhat recently. Airbnb is, I think, a really good example of this. Airbnb was founded in 2008. They didn't go through their initial public offering until 2020. Okay. For those 12-ish years, from 2008 to 2020, Airbnb had to raise a ton of money from investors to expand their business operations, but they just didn't do it publicly. They did it through Regulation D private placements, right? So think about this. Like, what if like you were able to get in the front door, get into Airbnb, buy Airbnb stock in 2010 when everyone's like, who the heck is Airbnb? I've never heard of this company. Now everyone knows what Airbnb is. If you're able to get in the door in the beginning before the company grows significantly, it means you can usually get access to their stock, buy their stock at a really cheap price, and like that company grows and grows and grows. You can become like a millionaire, multi-millionaire if that's the case, right? Same thing with like almost every tech company. Like imagine like if you could buy Amazon stock back in like 1999. Let's just look at this. This is like Amazon was founded, I think, in 97, if I recall. How far does this chart go back? It goes back to like, okay, it does go back to 97. Okay, so like, look at that. If I invested in Amazon from the first day, let's go crazy. Let's say that like, I mean, nothing, let's just go from like 2002 onward, okay? 2002 onward. It's 22,000% return. So like to put this in perspective, yeah, like if I invested $1,000, if I invested like $1,000 into Amazon, let's say from the very start, or from the very start, from all time, 207,000. So we would do 207 6.77. If you invested $1,000 in Amazon, hopefully I'm doing my math right here, but like if you invested $1,000 and that's all from day one in Amazon, that $1,000 today would be worth 2.07 million. It's a little bit over 2 million, right? Now, if you had put like even more, right? If you put even more, then you if I put $2,000, I got 4 million. If I put $5,000, I got like I got an incredible amount of money. So the point is like getting in early is the cool thing to do, especially if the company does well. Now the problem is that like for every Amazon out there, there's like probably 50 to 100 companies, other tech companies that just didn't make it. So like, in the beginning, if you're investing into a company privately in the beginning, you're taking on a lot of risk. What is it, like 9 out of 10 new businesses fail in the first 10 years of their existence? So you're definitely taking on risk. Okay, investing in private placements is incredibly risky. Just knowing the track record of most companies, but if you happen to invest your money into the right company, you can make an incredible return. Right, incredible return. So let's get back here. But back to the whole point, if you've passed your Series 7, 65, or 82 and hold that with like you're working actively in the industry, you are accredited and you might be able to, like, gives you access to like private placements. So you might be able to buy into the stock of like the next big like tech company before people even know about it. What else do we have here? Directors, executive officers, partners. Yeah, okay, how about this? So we just put this. Officers, directors, and or partners, partners of the issuer. So like if you're, going back to the Airbnb example, if I'm the marketing director of Airbnb in 2010, I'm making like no money because like I'm working for like a brand new startup company. I don't qualify through like any of the annual income or the net worth, but I would qualify just being an officer, director, or partner of the issuer. Cool. By the way, when they say officer, executive officer, directors, executive officers, or general partners of the company selling the securities, that means the issuer. The issuer is the company selling the securities. Any family client or family office that qualifies as an accredited investor. I think there's like an easier way to put this, but let's just look into this real quick. Like when we say family client or family office, typically when I see the term family office, I hear like, okay, this is like, an office of people that manages like a billionaire's money or something like that. Family office is a privately held company that handles investment management and wealth management for a wealthy family, generally one with at least 50 to 100 million in investable assets. So like, for example, like you're going to find a family office for like Bill Gates. You're going to find a family office for like Jeff Bezos, stuff like that. Like a team of people that's only job is to manage that family's money, basically. Now, I would assume, like getting back to this, a family client or of a family office that qualifies as an accredited investor, like shoot, any family client of a family office, so like a family member whose money is tied up in a family office. How about this? Family client of a family office that qualifies as accredited. Maybe like we put that there. I don't know. That's one that I don't think most people see that in an exam. Investments in a private fund, knowledgeable employees of private funds. What is it? What do they even mean about that? Knowledgeable employees of a private fund. By the way, a private fund, good example of that would be like a hedge fund. Any kind of fund that takes money from people, but like not publicly, privately. We'll put private fund. We'll put hedge is probably like their most best example of a private fund. What else do we have here? How are entities? Yeah, a number of entities can be considered accredited. So a entity with 5+ million in investable assets. Cool. So like, any corporation essentially you could think of. Following assets, entities with assets in excess of 5 million, corporations, partnerships, LLCs. I'm just going to put like entity there because let's just keep it simple. If it's like a corporation or a business or entity of some form, if they have more than 5 million to invest, they're considered accredited. How about this? Any entity where all owners of that entity are accredited. So, for example, if I'm considered accredited and my friend is considered accredited and we start a business together, our business, if we own it together and we're both accredited, our business is also considered accredited, even if it doesn't have 5 million in in investable assets. I told you guys I'm getting over a sickness here. Thanks for dealing with my voice. Investment advisors. Okay, cool. Investment advisors. We talked about investment advisors yesterday. We also have it like listed below. An investment advisor is a company. I know that sounds like a person, but it's a company. By the way, for you Series 63, 65, or 66 holders, an investment advisor is technically a person. The legal definition of a person is any human being, any natural person or legally formed entity. So from a legal perspective, an investment advisor is a person. I guess what I'm trying to say, an investment advisor, like we don't mean like an individual, like a human being. An investment advisor is a firm, a company who makes a business out of giving advice in securities or managing securities accounts. So like, Edward Jones, for example, if I have my money with Edward Jones and I pay them a management fee to manage my money, that would be considered an investment advisor. So investment advisors are considered accredited, and then financial entities. The exam oftentimes will refer to this as institutions, which we'll eventually get into, like the definition of an institution here. Did I spell that right? I definitely did not spell that right, but either way, you can't. By the way, you guys can't even see what I'm typing down here. My bad. Financial institutions, cool. Let's just copy paste this in. Let's be lazy. Banks, savings and loan associations, which is basically like a bank, insurance companies, registered investment company. By the way, a registered investment company would be best example. That's a mutual fund, like an open-end fund, or AKA a mutual fund, is a type of investment company. Business development company, BDCs. We'll eventually get to those and talk about what they are. Small business investment company, which is an investment company that just invests in small businesses, or rural, if I can say that word, investment company, rural business investment company. Those are exactly what they sound like. Okay. I thought there was like some other weird thing to be aware of with accredited. And I think I saw this in the wiki, which I should probably not be looking at the wiki for this stuff. But like the SEC's website is way better than this. But like, here we go. Let's say US. Okay. Most of these we talked about. A bank, employee benefit plan with assets of at least 5 million. So like we talked about those, like basically any entity that like has at least 5 million to invest, blah, blah, blah. Natural person, a trust in excess of 5 million. Cool. Natural person who has professional certification, talked about. Natural persons of knowledgeable employees of a fund. Cool. LLCs with 5 million to invest. Cool. Investment advisors. Cool. Here, this is what I was thinking of that was not listed. Indian tribes, governmental bodies, and funds and entities organized under laws of foreign countries that are own investments. Okay, and so we're going to put that into the bucket of entities with at least 5 million to invest. So that's why I didn't see it separately listed on the SEC's website. Spousal equivalent to an accredited investor definition. So that, how about this? Let's put that on there too, because that's something I think it could maybe get tricky with. We'll just put this up here. Spouses of accredited investors are accredited themselves. Okay. Awesome. That is our definition of an accredited investor. Awesome. Sick. By the way, I'm going to get through the rest of the investor stuff here, and then we're going to take a break. Institutional investors. Okay, institutional investors. Let's talk about this. Accredited investors, institutional investors. Cool. Let's talk about institutional investors. Now, I guess the question here would be like, who's defining an institutional investor? Maybe like the SEC or like legal definition. Okay, here we go. Let's take the SEC's definition here. It's really small. Holy crap. Let's just copy this and we'll paste it into our outline. I wonder if FINRA has its own definition of it. I bet FINRA and the SEC's definition is probably like exactly the same. Defined by regulation to include but not limited to. Say we'll just put it here as like definition. Manager of investment accounts on behalf of other than natural persons with affiliates to exercise sole discretion. Wait, is there more than just that? I thought I copied everything. Oh, geez, it's way more than this. Let's see how like specific, because I don't think the exams, especially the SIE, should not get like super in detail here of like what's institutional. Fair market value of less than 10 million, investment companies and universities other than organizations, blah, 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 trust accounts and individual, blah, 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 blah. How about, like, let's see, does FINRA have an institutional definition? FINRA institutional investor definition. FINRA's definition is probably a little bit better. How about institutional customer? Let's do that. Institutional customer definition. Here we go. There we go. That is our beautiful. That is our definition. I don't think we need actually. Remember this. Let's just put this back here. Banks, savings and loan associations, or institutions, insurance companies. How about this? General. We'll do general definition. I'm going to put my own definition on this one, which is professional investor that. How about professional that invests customer/client funds as a business? That's probably our best definition. Here's some examples. Okay. Examples of this would be, okay, cool. Banks. Savings and loan associations, yes. Insurance companies, yes. Let's move that over. Insurance companies are registered investment companies like a mutual fund, for example. Registered investment advisors, we'll talk about those. Again, those are firms that give advice or manage client accounts as a business. Or any person, whether natural or corporation, with total assets of at least 50 million. So like if you have 50 million plus, you are considered an institution. With total assets exceeding 50 of at least 50 million. So just at least. Okay, cool. Put a comma in there. FINRA is notoriously bad with grammar and commas, but we'll just keep that there. All right. So that is our general definition. So we have a general definition of institutional investor, basically a professional that invests customer client funds as a business. I think that's a good general definition. Like maybe like if I have like, for example, Bill Gates himself, who has like, he's a multi-billionaire, if I remember correctly. Bill Gates might not be might not invest client money, but like he's considered himself an institutional investor. Kind of think of it that way. All right, let's see. Can we get let's stick with FINRA here on this one. Let's do, this will be the last one, then I'm going to take a break. And I'll come back later. Retail investors or retail investors. Say definition. FINRA does have a definition of this somewhere. Definition. Okay. Retail investor definition FINRA. Oh yeah. Yeah, they gotta give the out. So like any investor not considered an institutional investor. Okay. Basically, how about this? Like generality. We'll put the generality here. An individual investing for themselves or their family. I think that's my own definition. How about this? A non-professional investor, non-professional individual investing for themselves or their family. Probably like, again, that's my definition. Maybe not as like succinct or legally sound as like FINRA's, but that's the idea. Okay, cool. Made some progress on this. We talked about FDIC. We finished at SIPC, FDIC. Talked about different types of investors being accredited, institutional, and retail. We will definitely come back to that stuff later because we gotta talk about like different things in this exam, like communications to these types of investors, that type of stuff. For right now, I'm gonna go ahead and stop streaming. Thanks for watching, and we'll pick up where we left off at some point in time in the near future.